Hey there, I see a few people have already joined us. They're coming and going. um, Ev and I already said hi to each other, but as you're joining us, welcome, welcome. If you've got any questions that you're bringing to the session, you are very welcome to put them in the chat at any time. We've got a special question and answer time at the end, but if a question occurs to you, please feel free to put it in the chat, and either I'll handle it as it comes up, or for sure in the question and answer time at the end. Also, I would love to invite you to let me know in the chat, where are you joining us from today? So I'm based in Berlin, Germany, and that's where I am today. But where are you all calling in from? Where are you joining us from? You can write it in the chat, please. Joining from London. Welcome, Anna. Just one time zone away from me. Ev's joining from Moscow. I'm trying to think. I think we are either 2 or 3 hours apart time wise. Jose is joining from Chicago. Welcome. 7 hours away from me time wise. Welcome, welcome. Marcel's joining us from New York City. Awesome. 6 hours away from me. And Jeffrey's joining us from Washington, D.C., also in Eastern Time. Welcome. Ed, we're just an hour apart. I think sometimes of the year we're 2 hours apart, and this time of the year we're only 1 hour apart, because if I remember right, uh, Russia doesn't do daylight savings time, if I remember correctly. So we've gone forward an hour, and now we're just an hour apart. Welcome, welcome. For folks that are just joining us, please feel free to drop in the chat. Where are you joining us from? So far, we've got London, Moscow, Chicago, New York City, and Washington, D.C. Folks who are just joining, where are you joining us from? Drop it in the chat. Alfonso's in Boston. Welcome. Jack in
Thank you.
Pittsburgh. Welcome, welcome. Stuart's also in London. Excellent. We've also got another attendee from London today. Thanks for joining us. It's always fun when we try to schedule times for this to find, like, what is a good time that will work for a lot of people across time zones, which is really the story of my life, being based in Berlin. So thinking sometimes about, how can I talk with someone in Sydney and how can I talk with someone in San Francisco? So, but we make it work, the wonder of the internet and the GMAT that brings us all together. If you haven't already, drop in the chat where you're joining us from. I'm going to give folks one more minute to join, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. Also, folks who had already joined, I invited you at any time during the session. If a particular question comes up, please feel free to drop it in the chat. I will address it as soon as it makes sense, as soon as it fits in the flow. We definitely have a dedicated question and answer time at the end of the session. But we're a couple of minutes after the hour now, so I would say let's go ahead and get started. So this session is recorded for the Leland platform, and so after it finishes, if for any reason you need to leave early or you get interrupted by call or something like that, within about 48 hours, I'll be able to send out a link to the recording for you, which is for your purposes, but also if you have other friends who are studying for the GMAT or the GRE and you think they could benefit from this advice, please feel free to share the recording with them. The more the merrier when it comes to this kind of thing. So I'm Jennifer. I'm joining you from Berlin, Germany, and let's go ahead and get started. We're going to be talking about cool, calm, and laser focused, how you can tame your high stakes test anxiety. So when I've hosted this session in the past, we've focused specifically on the GMAT, but I know some of you may be preparing for some other tests like the GRE or other important exams in your life. This advice is quite applicable to all of them. So see if we can get our slides to get going for us. So here's our agenda for the day. We'll give us a few overview thoughts, and then we'll really get into the content. So we'll be talking about understanding the roots of where does test anxiety come from. So it'll give us some basics about brain science and an idea that I call your saboteurs. These will give us some foundations for understanding what's going on in your mind when you experience anxiety, when you study, or before a test. And then we'll start talking about success strategies. So what are some concrete things you can do before an exam, during an exam, and even after the exam to get a handle on that anxiety? Then we'll have time for question and answer, and then we will be wrapping up. So we'll plan to wrap things up in just about an hour. So a little bit about me, your presenter today. I'm Jennifer. I've been coaching on the Leland platform for about a year now, but overall I've been coaching GMAT, GRE, and SAT candidates for 12 years of doing this. So I'm based in Berlin, Germany, but previously I was based in Paris. Although you may be able to hear in my voice, I am originally from the United States. I'm originally from Florida. So you can see on the slide, back in the day, I actually started my career with the Walt Disney Company in Central Florida, where I worked in show development, but also in training and development. So I've always had an interest in training and helping people reach their goals. My career in the United States then went on in the area of arts management and nonprofit leadership. But I moved to Paris 12 years ago and pursued a second master's degree. And when I was there, I kind of happened into coaching the GMAT, which I thought would be like a fun side job to have. And then after about 3 or 4 months, I realized, hey, I think I'm hooked on this. I really appreciated working with GMAT candidates. So I had taken the GMAT myself as an MBA candidate the first time back in 2004. And what was really interesting to me, so I've been kind of a lifelong test taker. I've chronically done well on American standardized tests, but the first time I took the GMAT, I ran out of time on the quant section. So this was actually so long ago that you couldn't really take practice tests in the way that you can now. And so I had never possibly run out of time on a standardized test before, and I ran out of time on GMAT quant. And so I think in a way that kind of intrigued me about the test, that it was not so easily beaten. And so then later when I was living in Paris and I picked up this opportunity to coach folks for the GMAT, I realized this is actually really fun. So for the first several years, I just coached on the verbal side of the exam. Later, when I moved to Berlin, I started coaching across the full exam. I took the test again as a professional, and that was when I scored a 770, including a perfect score on the verbal side. Since then, I've served as a verbal section expert for the forums on GMAT Club and also have hosted several of their live events. I also have been extremely fortunate here in Europe to have a close relationship with GMAT, the developers of the test. Once a year, and sometimes more than once a year, like when the new GMAT Focus was introduced, they actually invite some of us test prep nerds to these summit meetings where we actually get to speak with the chief psychometrician who develops the scoring algorithm as well as the philosophy that underlies the test. And so the opportunity to experience those meetings, to ask questions of the chief psychometrician, and to be surrounded by other people who are just as nerdy about the GMAT as I am, has been an outstanding experience. And it's something that I've really appreciated, especially now with the changes to the exam that took place at the beginning of 2024, and it helps me feel like I can really speak from a place of authority, and that if there's any kind of thing about the test that I don't know, I actually have contacts that I can go to. So what's really makes it the most rewarding is helping people achieve their goals, which is the point. And so what I hope you get from today's session is not only some concrete things that you'll be able to use to help you achieve your goals with the GMAT, but also some real skills and strategies that you will be able to apply beyond the exam. You can see there's also a handy dandy discount code for you for my coaching on the Leland platform. You can use this discount code. I'll also message it to you afterwards so that you have it. But for any of the packages that are available with me on Leland, you can receive 15% off. I'll share that code with you again as we get to the end. But so to tell you a little bit about how I look at GMAT prep, and how this approach of mine has evolved over the past 12 years, I've realized a lot of people focus particularly in this area of content knowledge, right? People may be sometimes overwhelmed by all of the content that need to know for the GMAT. You need so much content in quant, and then there's content about logical reasoning. You need to improve your reading comprehension skills. You need to improve your data analysis skills. So there's pieces of things that we need to know objectively. Then there's skills and strategies that are specific to the GMAT, or to the GRE, if that's the test that you're working on, or also the SAT. So when you're preparing for one of these important exams, we need to know the content, but then we also need some specific skills and strategies for how that content is going to be tested on this exam. So there are lots of ways to solve a rates and work question, but there are some ways that are particularly helpful for setting that up on the GMAT, for example, when you don't have a calculator, or on the GRE when the calculator that you have is very clunky and built in only to the screen. But I realized after about the first 2 years of coaching that I had folks who were doing really well in these two areas. They had done the work in content. They had really learned specific skills and strategies. But sometimes when they went to take a practice test or the real test, they were not able to show what they knew. And we realized that what was going on here was in this third category. And so now I look at this as a three-legged stool. When you're preparing for an exam like the GMAT, you need to address all three legs of the stool. It's not just enough to know the content, to have specific skills and strategies that you can use to deploy on the test. You also need to develop your ability to perform well. And for that, I look at this as your positive mindset. So that mindset includes your ability to focus, your confidence, your endurance to keep up that focus and confidence through the length of the exam, and your adaptability, how you handle it when things change during the exam, when you get something that you don't expect, or perhaps you've gotten a question that you know you didn't handle well. Can you adapt from that? Can you move on? This is also a piece that you want to work on in your preparation for the GMAT, the GRE, or any important exam. And so I'd love to get a little bit of feedback from those of you in the room now. Do you have an exam coming up? You can type in the chat. If your exam is within the next 2 weeks, type in A. If it's between 2 weeks and 2 months from now, you can type in B. If it's more than 2 months from now, put C in the chat. Or if you don't actually have an exam date currently planned, but you're just working on prep right now, you can tell us D. Okay. Some folks who have got potentially a longer timeline, but we've also got a few of you in the room where you have an exam coming up quite soon. So either within the next 2 weeks or within a horizon from 2 weeks to more than 2 months from now. I will let you know for everybody in the room, you can apply these strategies that we're going to be talking about today. You can start putting those things to work for you today. So even if your exam is coming up in a very short timeline, there are some of these things that can make a real difference for you. If you have a longer time to prepare, even better. You can practice these things for longer. You can really make it part of your routine and make it habit for you. And we'll talk about that as it goes on. Okay. Oh, and Jeffrey, I see your note too. You've already taken the exam once, and now you're looking to improve and prepare better and take it. I'll tell you, a lot of people come to me in exactly that situation. Like, okay, now I've seen what it is. Now I start to have an idea of what I need to do to achieve my goals and do better. Okay, the next piece that I would love to have your feedback on is let me know, how does test anxiety affect you? And you can choose more than one of these if it's true for you. So do you A, get questions wrong that you would normally be able to do? Do you B, consider not applying to programs that require exams? Do you C, doubt your own abilities and potential? Or do you experience D, the days leading up to the exam are overshadowed by dread? You could have more than one of these, so feel free to put those in. Okay, so I see we've got doubting abilities and potential, getting questions wrong that you actually know how to do, dealing with that feeling of dread that comes up. And a few of you also thinking about, do I really want to apply to a program that requires exams? If you're just joining us, you can pop in the chat. How does test anxiety affect you? A, B, C, or D, or choose multiples. C and D, doubting your abilities and potential, and that feeling of dread. Yes, and then sometimes it's actually all of these. So if we think about this, I mean, man, what a bummer. Like, seriously, that when you've done the work and then you say, I look back at these questions, I know how to do that, but I just couldn't command my presence of mind at the time to focus on that. Also, B, I also do some admissions consulting work. B, I find really heartbreaking as well when people who are really bright and have so much to offer sometimes want to take off programs that would require them to take an exam because they think, I'm not sure if I really want to handle this. C, I was just talking with a student that I was meeting with here in person in Berlin last night, and we talked a lot about C. The GMAT in particular, but any important test can get to you sometimes. It makes you doubt, is this MBA plan wrong for me? Was I crazy to think I should be doing this? Am I maybe not cut out for this? And then D, that feeling where the closer you get to the exam, that dread is hanging over you like a cloud or a shadow. I think you all can see from the responses in the chat, you're not alone in any of this. So many people are experiencing this, but we don't have to. So let's think about some of the foundations of understanding test anxiety. So first of all, I want to think about the idea of stress. And if there's a time that stress is actually beneficial for us, has anyone ever experienced that stress could help them a little? Has there ever been a time that stress motivates you, that it gets you off your butt to do something or to finish a project? I'll show you a lovely graph here. So if you look on the x-axis running across the bottom, we've got an increasing level of pressure. So a level of pressure that might be high, that as the stress increases, level of pressure moves up to moderate, high, or very high. And then how does that affect our performance? So performance here on the y-axis, you can see going from low to high. For many people, having a moderate amount of stress, we could consider eustress. So that prefix EU is positive, it's beneficial. So this ideal zone would be where the stress is pushing us to the edge of our comfort zone and pushing us into a stretch where it's actually helping us perform better than if there was no stress. If there's no stress, we could be experiencing boredom. But what we want to avoid is getting into this place of distress where the strain is too much and that's actually reducing our performance. So when we think about what we want to achieve with taming test anxiety or managing our anxiety, we're not trying to go to zero anxiety, right? We're not trying to go to zero stress. That's unrealistic and actually may not be helpful. But we want to think about managing it into this zone of optimal performance, where we're perhaps at that stretch level, but where the stress is actually beneficial for us and not detrimental, not a state of distress. So a little brain science for us. Those of you who have studied some mindfulness or breathing techniques may already be well aware of this. So we can think about a little bit of brain science that is helpful for us to know as it comes to managing our anxiety and managing our stress levels when we're working on an important exam. When you are experiencing a state of high anxiety, when you have entered the feeling of fight or flight, or actually we can call that fight, flight, or freeze, what's typically happening in your brain is that your reptilian brain, your lizard brain, we could say, is being activated. So more blood is flowing to the amygdala in particular. So this was really helpful adaptation when early humans were constantly being threatened by predators. So when we saw a predator, saber-toothed tiger or some other animal was running at us, or a warring tribe was coming to get us, it's important that that amygdala kick into gear, that it send us into fight, flight, or freeze mode. That's important. That could help our survival. The challenge that we experience in our modern lives is that sometimes this mode kicks in when it's not about our survival, when fight, flight, or freeze is actually not helpful. When what we really want to be doing is thinking with our higher order thinking. So our higher order thinking lives more in the prefrontal cortex. So this is one of the last areas of the brain to fully develop as you mature. This is the area where you experience decision making, creativity, the things that you're most curious and passionate and creative about. When you're able to operate in this kind of a zone, you could think of it as your wizard brain, when you're able to see a new solution or feel a full sense of joy. This is usually because your prefrontal cortex has been activated. So when you're working on the exam, for example, and you want to be able to access that higher order thinking, if your lizard brain has been activated, it's going to be really hard to access that higher order thinking. We want to learn some techniques to deactivate fight, flight, or freeze. And so we'll talk about some very specific techniques you can use so that you can reactivate your prefrontal cortex, so that you can take decisions, so that you can use all of your executive functioning, so that you can see a creative approach to a problem. So as we think about this, I don't want us to think about, oh, that lizard brain is bad, 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 bad. I'm so mad that I have that. Why is that happening? Right? This is normal. This is a normal part of our way that our brain is built and that it developed. Sometimes it kicks in at times that we don't want it to, but I really want you to understand stress responses are normal. Anxiety responses, up to a certain point, are normal. So you don't need to feel like, I'm so abnormal. Why is my brain doing this weird thing? Can't I out evolve the cavemen? This is a normal response, but when it goes too far, this is where you want strategies to change what's happening so that you can switch over into your prefrontal cortex to be able to activate this higher level reasoning. So you want to be able to recognize, okay, my brain is producing lots of thoughts, as you see in this little cartoon. The brain is producing lots and lots of thoughts, but not all of those thoughts are facts. Some of those thoughts are actually contributing to my increased state of anxiety, and I want to get used to recognizing which thoughts are not helping me, and in fact, take only the ones that I know are facts and leave the other ones behind. So in order to do this, I want us to think about a concept called your sage and your saboteurs. Sometimes it can really help to personify these different thoughts and think about which characters do you want in your mind and which ones do you not want. So when your sage mind is talking, the wizard brain, this is motivating you through those positive emotions like empathy and creativity and curiosity. You can picture it's your saboteurs talking when it's more of your lizard brain that has been activated. When your saboteurs are talking, these voices, these thoughts often try to motivate you through negative emotions. So instead of the positive emotions like empathy and curiosity and creativity of the sage, the saboteurs motivate us, or try to motivate us anyway, through fear, anxiety, guilt, shame, or insecurity. So again, it's this fight, flight, or freeze mode. So if you're feeling any of these negative emotions and you know there's not an actual physical danger to you in your immediate presence, it may help to think about, there is a saboteur speaking to me. Can I recognize which saboteur it is? So I'd like to share with you now a number of different typical exam saboteurs that students have told me about. You may recognize some or more of these saboteurs in yourself. You may say, oh, I've heard that voice before. Or you may think of some other kinds of thoughts that come up for you that might be associated with negative emotions. If you're thinking of some other thoughts that aren't captured here, I'll tell you, it can be really helpful to come up with a name. So I'll show you, I've given each of these saboteurs a little nickname. You can give your saboteur a nickname. You can think of an image to go with it. This can make it a lot easier to recognize whenever it has shown up in your thinking. So we all have saboteurs. Every single one of us, even the most Zen person, has got some kind of a saboteur that shows up from time to time in their thinking. And I want us to recognize this point over here. Each saboteur is actually rooted in good intentions. Those voices, those thoughts actually came from a well-meaning place trying to help you, but they take it too far. So let's think about what some of these look like on a high stakes exam. One of the most common saboteurs that people tell me about, I call doom time. The voice that starts talking to you about the time in a very negative way. So doom time often says to you, you don't have enough time. You don't have enough time to do this well. You don't have enough time to think about that. Oh, don't use that method. It will take too long. You're going too slow. Go faster, go faster, go faster. So again, some of that's rooted in a good intention, right? Time management is important during any of these exams. So doom time is that initial idea that we need to manage the time, but it goes too far, and that it's trying to motivate you through fear and anxiety. And in fact, sometimes it's speaking so loud that you can no longer really think through the problem, and you can't access that higher order reasoning that you want to be able to access. So this is doom time. The next one I hear about, I call the discounter. And so this is based on the idea of to discount something is to say, besides in a store, it could be marking the price down, but we can also use the idea of discounting as to say, it doesn't count. It's not important. And so if you have ever, for example, done a practice set of questions and you've gotten the majority of them correct, but the only ones you focus on and then you really start beating yourself up about are the ones that were incorrect. So obviously we want to look at the questions that we got incorrect, that we want to learn from them and think about what we can do to move forward. But the discounter is when you take that too far. You don't give yourself credit for any of the good work that you've done, and you only focus on the negative things. This is the discounter. So again, it's coming from a place of good intentions. It wants you to improve. It wants you to see what can you learn from these mistakes, but very often it takes it too far and it starts attacking you and causing you to lose sight of all of the good work that you did, all of the good things that you were able to deliver on that practice test or that real exam. Brute force. I see this one a lot in tests. So brute force, I think, happens especially in quant focused sections. So, but not only. So brute force is this voice that says, shortcuts are for the weak. Don't take the easy way out. Maybe you've heard about, oh, on certain problems, it could be helpful to work from the answer choices. Or it might be helpful not to write an equation, but that brute force voice says, no, shortcuts are for the weak. You need to do it the way that you learned in class. And even, I don't care if that takes 4 minutes, you need to write it all out. Brute force also shows up when you've told yourself, okay, I want to study 18 hours a week for the GMAT, and I just got home from a long day at work. I'm totally exhausted, but I committed to studying 3 hours, and I'm going to study 3 hours. Even if your patience with yourself isn't there, even if your mental focus and concentration isn't there, brute force is the one that comes in and says, you better do it because you committed to doing it, even when you're not actually in a good state for learning. So again, brute force is coming from a place of good intentions, but the effect on you is not necessarily positive. Studying for 3 hours after work when you're super exhausted sometimes is less productive than studying for 90 minutes before work the next day when you would be fresher and, crucially, when you would have more patience with yourself to learn something new or to address your mistakes. Another saboteur, I was just talking about this one with a student the other day as well. Please like me. This is the saboteur that as you're practicing questions, you are looking for validation from the answers. When you get a question right, you feel great and it makes you feel like, yes, I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing the right thing with my life. My plan to apply for an MBA or my plan to apply for this graduate program is right because I got this question right. And then when you get a question wrong, the opposite happens. Your self-esteem plummets and you think, oh my gosh, I am wasting my life. I've made the wrong goals. I'm crazy to think I could get into this program. So that your self-esteem and your personal worth seems to go up and down based on whether you get individual questions correct or based on what that number is that's shown at the end of your practice test or of your real exam. So again, coming from a place of good intentions, you want to care about whether you're getting things right or wrong. But when you step away from it, you can see how that's an exaggeration. This please like me version is quite an exaggeration, that you don't want your whole self-esteem and self-worth to rise and fall based on getting individual questions right. When please like me takes over as a saboteur in your mind, again, it makes it really hard to think clearly. It makes it really hard to reason through things because now you're afraid of getting it wrong because you're afraid that getting it wrong means this is the wrong path altogether. Objectively, when you step away from it, you know that getting a single question wrong can't mean that. But when please like me is taken over in your head, it sure feels like that's true. Final test saboteur that I'll talk to us about today is one that I call instant replay. Instant replay is the one that says, hey, I remember a time that I took a test and it went terribly. Or I remember a time that I took a test and the teacher came over and told me what a bad job I had done on that problem, or said some comment to me that was 20 years ago and it sticks with me to this day. Maybe it was 2 months ago in an algebra class in the program that you're in now, and it's sticking with you. So instant replay takes this ability that we have, and we'll talk about how to deploy this in a positive way. It takes this ability that we have to watch a movie in our mind, so to speak. But instant replay is the saboteur that comes in and says, we're putting in the tape and we're watching the mental footage of these things that have gone poorly. I'm going to remind myself of all of the times that I've screwed it up, or perhaps one particular time that went really badly. You can imagine how this, again, has a terrible effect on your self-esteem, your ability to concentrate, your confidence as it relates to the test that you're looking at now. So instant replay is also one that we want to recognize, stop, and diffuse with some of the techniques that we'll talk about. So I'm curious, of these 5 saboteurs, does anyone relate to any of these? You can write in the chat if there is one or more of these saboteurs that you relate to, that you have heard from in your mind. Let me know in the chat. Brute force. Doom time and brute force. Instant replay a lot. It's a powerful one. Brute force and please like me. Anyone else? Doom time. And brute force. The discounter. So all of these, there's a good root to it, but we want to recognize when it's speaking to us so that when it's taking it too far in this way, so that we can dial it back and replace it with a thought that we want to have that is going to be more empowering and not disempowering like these saboteurs are. So if you look at this image of placing your hand on a hot stove, we could think about, is pain ever useful? If we think about the example of placing your hand on a hot stove, pain sends us a message really quickly. In the case of putting your hand on the hot stove, pain says, hey, alert, stop that, move your hand, don't burn your hand. If I think about this as it relates to our emotions and about anxiety, I don't want to say that I'm going to eliminate any possible sign of anxiety. What I want to look at it is like the idea of pain, that I can feel it and say, aha, I want to do something different. When I feel those first when I hear those first thoughts, or when I feel those evidences of anxiety, I can use it just like pain is a signal. I need to take my hand off the hot stove. I can think about that in my mind. Those thoughts are like putting my hand on the hot stove. I need to recognize that and take my hand metaphorically off the hot stove of these saboteur thoughts. So what we want to think about doing is first do some actions to intercept the saboteurs. I'll talk about some strategies for that now coming up. Then we'll think about what can we do to engage your sage brain, your higher order thinking powers, so that you can address the problems in the exam with creativity, with problem solving skills, so that you can use your executive functioning, and also critically so that you can address yourself with a sense of empathy, the kind of empathy that you would give someone else that you care about a lot. So we intercept the saboteurs, we engage that sage brain in the prefrontal cortex, and then by acting in that wizard mind, that sage brain, then we will be able to take the laser focused action that we want to and have full control over what we're doing on the exam. So let's think about some ways specifically that we can intercept those saboteurs. So I'll give you on this slide, I'll give you a number of different ways. And as we get to the end of the session, I will ask you which of these that you are planning to try out. You could try them out later today. You could try them out this week, but don't let more than this week go by before you try out some of these things. So I'll give you a menu of some different things that you might try. And then at the end of the session, I'm going to want to hear which ones of these do you want to try out. A tried and true and scientifically proven way to intercept your saboteurs, to start to disengage that lizard brain, is to engage in some breathing exercises. It is scientifically proven to help diffuse lizard brain. And I will tell you guys, super honestly, for so long in my life, when people said to me, like, just breathe, it drove me up the wall. When people would say, oh, take a deep breath, I heard that as like, you don't think my concerns are real. You're just trying to shut me up. But then as I was doing research in the course of trying to help my students, I started to read this research about breathing. And I was like, oh, wait, there's actually really compelling science to this. So I'll talk to you here about two particular different breathing exercises that you might try. There are many different breathing techniques that are out there, but these are two particular ones that I think can be quite relevant for an exam. The first one is 4-7-8 breathing for calm. And so this refers to breathing in for 4 breaths, hold it for 7 breaths, and then breathe out for 8 breaths. So that is not a typo. We really do want to be holding it and breathing out for longer than we're breathing in. This is what helps bring your heart rate down. This is what helps diffuse the lizard brain. So let's try it all together, shall we? Let's give you your first piece of experience with this. So we're going to breathe in for 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Breathe out through your mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So, and then you could do it again a few times. So this breathing for calm is great when you feel that you're running at too high a frequency. 4-7-8 breathing is also really good when you can't fall asleep at night. Try 4-7-8 breathing. It's very good for bringing you down. So if you feel like you're in an acute sense of stress, if you feel that the anxiety level has gotten too high, you could try 4-7-8 breathing. If, on the other hand, you feel like you want to focus, like maybe the anxiety is not really high, but you feel really scattered and not focused, I would encourage you to try box breathing. Box breathing, you'll see, has 4 different ones. So we could think of it as a box, and you can even move your hand if you want to. So the first 4 are breathing in, the second 4 are holding it, the next 4 are breathing out, and the last 4 are holding that. So let's try this one. We'll breathe in for 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out through your mouth. 2, 3, 4. Hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4. So these are just a few different breathing exercises, but I strongly, strongly suggest that you try these. You could try doing some box breathing anytime before you sit down for a study session. Or if you feel like your focus just isn't where you want it to be, do a few rounds of box breathing. See if that makes a difference. Very often it does. I want to give us some other techniques that we can also use to diffuse any of those saboteurs if they've popped up in our minds. Sometimes it is very helpful to give your mind something else to do. So breathing can be good for that, especially when you're having to do the counting. We can also use techniques from mindfulness meditation to be effective here. So some of you on the call may practice mindfulness already. Highly recommend it. It's outstanding. I'll give you a few different techniques here that you might enjoy. In general, we can think about mindfulness as activating our five senses, getting us to be here in the here and now. Very often when anxiety has taken over and we're thinking about the test, we're actually not thinking in the present. We're very often thinking in the future, like, oh God, what is the score going to be? Or am I going to run out of time? Or what is going to happen when the clock goes to zero? What is that number going to be that it's going to show me? Then I'm not going to be able to get into my dream school. And then my fiance will not marry me. And then, I mean, really, I'm not actually exaggerating. Like our brain goes to these doom scenarios in the future. Or sometimes our brain has gone to beating ourselves up about the past. Maybe that's instant replay, showing you things you've done wrong in the past, or maybe you're beating yourself up for not practicing or studying as much as you wanted to. The goal of mindfulness is to get us away from those thinking about the past and the future and to get us to right here, right now. For our purposes with the test, right here, right now is where we're going to be able to solve these problems, where we're going to be able to have that level of focus that we'll be able to really think through the critical reasoning, the reading comprehension, the data insights question. So to do that, we can activate a single sense. So one technique that I like is to choose a single sense and describe all that you notice. So describe it in your mind. This gives your mind a job. So let's say that you are in a city and you're practicing and maybe you've got the window cracked a little bit. If you focus on your sense of hearing and you listen for what is the closest sound to me that I can hear right now. I can tell you for me, it's the sound of my computer running. Computer's getting a little warm. I can hear the fan running. Then I could think about what's the furthest away sound that I can hear. Can I hear some traffic out the window? Or maybe I can hear birds, or I can hear some wind or the weather. I can come back to a close hearing. So for example, if I haven't already heard the sound of my own breath, I can listen for that. And I can go on in this way, describing different things that I notice. Then I could switch to a different sense. I could switch to my sense of sight and describing what's near and far, and so on. Another way that you can use mindfulness, and specifically using your sense of touch and using your body, if you're really quite stressed, sometimes it's hard to get your mind to play nicely with this focusing on different senses. And so then what can be really effective is to tense and relax. So choose a muscle group and let's tense it up. So for our purposes, I'd say let's use your hands and arms. Tense, 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 tense up your hands and arms. Tense, tense, tense for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and let it go. And really give yourself some time to feel there's a change. There's a sense of calm that you could get. Now, pick a different muscle group. You have a big muscle group. Even if you're sitting down, you can tense up your butt muscles. Those are big muscles. Your gluteus muscles, your hamstrings in the back of your legs. You can tense them up for 10 seconds and then let them go. So this is a nice physical one that you can use. If you are feeling really anxious and really stressed, try this tense and relax exercise. Another success strategy when you're dealing with your time of prep before the exam, you can think about curating the visuals that you're carrying around in your head. So, two different techniques I can suggest for us there. The first one, think about the images that you are associating with this test. So sometimes we are associating a really negative image of it, like we're picturing it like a marathon and we don't like marathons, or like a mountain to climb and that is not actually motivating to us, but rather very intimidating or demoralizing. What I would encourage you to do instead is think about different things that you have done that you have been proud of. You can make an actual collage of this. So you can pull, for example, different things, maybe when you graduated with your bachelor's degree, or maybe when you did something like rented your first apartment on your own, or think about different kinds of achievements, something that meant something to you. It actually doesn't have to have meant something to someone else, but something where you're actually proud of what you did there. Choose like 4 or 5 of those things and really make a collage. You could do it just even on slides. Like you could make a single slide with different images representing these different things that you're proud of, and then choose an image that you want to represent this upcoming exam and make it the next thing in that series that you are going to be proud of yourself for completing this exam, just like you were for these other sorts of things that were hard. That's one idea of how you can curate the mental visuals that you have. And then once you make that visual, you need to put it somewhere that you can see it. Make it your desktop screensaver, print it out and put it next to your workstation so that you come back to this visual and you're reinforcing this is going to be something that I am proud of myself for. Another great technique, and this is something that athletes often do, especially at high levels, you can make a mental movie of how you want your best performance on this exam to go. And this is like constructive daydreaming. You can picture, so let's say I'm planning to take the GMAT at 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning. I can picture, what time am I going to wake up? What am I going to eat for breakfast? When am I going to, if I'm going to a testing center, what time am I going to leave home? How am I going to get to the testing center? I picture myself arriving there early. I picture myself checking in. I picture myself sitting down to start the test, maybe doing some breathing exercises before I start. I picture how I want to handle different challenges that will come up. So you can really make that whole movie in your mind. And what can be super helpful is picture that a challenge did come up and that then you handled it, that you resolved it. So spend some time kind of directing that movie in your mind, and then you can play it back for yourself. Play it for yourself before you go to bed, in your mind's eye. Play it for yourself before you take a practice test. If you make yourself watch that mental visual enough, you can actually trick your brain into starting to think that that's a memory, that it's something you've already done, not something that you want to do. Another success strategy that I've seen pay off for people is to empty your brain of thoughts. And this is especially helpful if you are working while you are studying for your exam, or you've got some other big commitments that have a lot of thoughts going on in your mind. Very often when I work with people who have demanding jobs and they're also doing GMAT prep, we realize sometimes their whole focus is not there on the exam because they're still processing other things, particularly if you're working in a startup, but not only, right? They're still thinking about other things like, oh God, I need to handle that. Oh, I need to do this. Oh, I just had an idea for this other thing. If all those thoughts are going on in your head, it's hard to really think about the questions that are in front of you. So dump them all out before you start a study session, especially if you have been at work or school or wherever all day. Dump out all those thoughts on paper. With one of my students, we called this his focus sheet. And so he would dump out all of his thoughts so that then if it was things he was worried about at work or things he knew he needed to take care of, in a way, it was like his brain could look at that focus sheet and say, oh, you hear me. I see that you're going to handle that. And so then he would take the sheet, turn it over so that he could say, okay, I'm going to come back to that list later. But now on the back of this paper, I'm going to maybe set an intention for what I want to do with this practice. I want to work on getting better at this. I want to say this to myself about the practice. So if you find that thoughts about your work or other aspects of your life are kind of intruding when you're trying to focus on studying for the exam, they probably want to be listened to. And so I would suggest you get in the habit of dumping them out onto paper, so that your brain is like, oh yeah, she's listening to me. I'm going to stop bothering her with those things. And so that then you can have a clearer, fresher mind to work on your practice or your practice test. Okay. I want to give you also some success strategies that you can try when it's, so to speak, game time. So when you are going to be doing a practice exam, timed practice, or the real exam, what are some strategies that you can use in those cases? So before we were talking about what can you do ahead of time to prepare, and here, what can you do in the moment? We've been talking a lot about what you say to yourself, the voices that you hear speaking to yourself in your head. And so I want to speak constructively about what is the kind of talk that you want to have to yourself, right? We don't want to hear one of the saboteurs talking, but we do want to have some useful and helpful self-talk. So I have a little comic here for us that uses baseball as a metaphor. So we can think about positive self-talk, negative self-talk, and instructional self-talk. So he's standing out here before the game, and when he's engaging in positive self-talk, he says, today's going to be a great game. I'm excited to be out here today. So you can see how this before the game is starting to set himself up for a good performance. He's got a good attitude, as opposed to, anybody ever sat down to take a test and you say this to yourself? I don't feel well today, and I just know I'm going to do a bad job. I know I'm going to play like trash. I just want to go home. If you say this to yourself before a practice test, before the real test, before a practice session, it has an impact on your performance. Sometimes you just need to get those thoughts out, but you need to hear, okay, that was negative self-talk. I needed to get it out. Now I need to swing it back to a place of positive self-talk. On the other hand, let's notice what he's actually doing once he's playing the game and he's doing maybe a kind of complicated maneuver, or what to me, a non-baseball person, seems a complicated maneuver. He's sliding into home base. What's he saying to himself as he slides? He's not saying, oh God, I hope this works. He's instructing himself what to do. He says, keep your hands up and put one leg under the other when sliding. He is instructing himself in the steps to do, just like a coach would do if he was teaching someone else how to slide, or maybe this is the voice of the coach that he had when he first learned how to slide. He's instructing himself what to do. And so you too can use these kinds of ideas when it's game time, when it's test time or practice test time. In advance, you can speak to yourself using positive talk. And when it's in the moment, when you are confronted with a problem and you feel some anxiety going on, try to talk to yourself about what are the steps to take. If you needed to tell someone else how to handle this problem, what would you tell him to do first? What would you do him to do second? What would you tell him to do third? Walking yourself through those instructions, through those steps, get yourself focused on what you need to do. And it's also one of the reasons that teaching someone else can be such a powerful way to learn, that it solidifies, here are the steps I need to take. So this is thinking about self-talk during the exam. Another thing we want to think about is what you say to yourself about the time, right? Because many of us have doom time or some version of negative self-talk about time. And very often it comes back to the idea of, I don't have enough time to think. I don't have enough time to do this well. That is a really limiting thing to say to yourself about the time. So I encourage you to find something to say that's more positive and more constructive and gives the power back to you. Very often, I feel like the way we are thinking about the time is that we're giving the power to the clock and that thing ticking down at us like it's in charge. No, you're the manager. GMAT or GRE or SAT as a metaphor for the rest of your life. You're the one making the calls, not the clock. So let's give the power back to you and choose something to say that gives you that power, like, the time is a resource for me to use. Just like any project, I don't have unlimited financial resources, unlimited human resources. I don't have unlimited time resources, but it is a resource for me to use. I will use it strategically to get problems correct. Or sometimes this second mantra relates well or resonates with people. I want to use the time to show what I know and show what I can do. Every time I'm using time, that's what I'm doing it for. I'm using it to show what I know and what I can do. So if you know you're saying something negative to yourself about the time, find a different specific thing to say to yourself about the time. When you're in the practice test, when you're in the real exam, if you realize your focus is not there, it would be better to invest. So, thinking about the time as a resource, invest some of that resource in a mini break. Even a 15-second mini break could make a difference in your focus or your empathy with yourself. So this is where it can be really helpful to have tried out some of these different breathing exercises while you're studying. Or like we talked about, different sensory focuses from mindfulness meditation, or even taking a mental vacation to a positive memory. There was a study that asked participants to recall a positive vacation that they had had, or a funny joke that they had shared with friends. So like a funny experience that they had had with friends. And that particularly when it came to math, thinking about these positive memories boosted their mood overall and actually positively influenced their performance on the test. So you can think about, take a mini break. If you realize your focus or your emotion is not in the right place, even if the test is going on, it would be better to strategically invest 15 to 30 seconds in changing that, so that then the rest of the problems you do from there on out, you're in a much better mental state. Finally, this success strategy is called rehearse your resilience. This can be really powerful. And I worked with a student this past fall who saw his performance go up by 100 full points on the GMAT focus, specifically from doing this strategy. He really anticipated the things that bothered him when he had taken the exam before. And a lot of times these were external factors. So he got really bothered when someone else walked in the room at the testing center. He was really bothered when he ran into a late subway train or traffic, depending on the way that he had traveled. So thinking about these things that could get you off, that you know would bother you during the exam or before the exam, that would throw you off your path, think about those things happening and think about responding differently when they do. So this student that I'm talking about, who increased his score so dramatically, he actually rehearsed these things happening during practice exams. So if he had been bothered in the past by someone entering the room when he was testing, he had one of his friends or family members, while he's taking a practice test, he had them enter the room at random times that he didn't know about. He had them play different annoying sounds on their phones at times that he didn't know about, so that he could practice not being bothered by it. So that then when any of those things did happen in the real testing environment, he was just like, oh, I knew that was going to happen. I practiced that. I rehearsed for that. So you could make a list of all the different kinds of things that might come up that might bother you, and then rehearse that. Really rehearse that annoying thing happening, and rehearse actually getting over it and moving past it. Okay, so those are a number of different strategies that we can use while we're in the testing environment. I want to also talk to you about what you can do after the test. So I might think, after the test, what can I do after the test? The test is over. But actually, there's some positive things that you can do. And this, we can use the idea of the sage perspective. So again, coming from your higher order thinking, the sage perspective is looking for every situation to represent a gift or opportunity. So when the practice test finishes, when the real test finishes, you can think about, what did I get from this? What gift did I get? Even if the score wasn't what I wanted, did I gain the gift of knowledge? Did I learn something specific from this? Did I gain the gift of power? Did this make me stronger or better at something? Or did I gain the gift of inspiration? That maybe this has motivated me to do something differently in the future. So it's nice to have this conversation with yourself after a practice test, after a real exam, to make sure that you're taking things away from it that can make you better in the future. Okay, so we've talked about a number of different success strategies. I would like to see from you in the chat, which strategies will you try in the next week? Which strategies will you try in the next week? Okay, I see breathing exercises, getting the thoughts on paper, working on curating your mental visuals, doing breathing and paying attention to your self-talk. Which strategies can you try in the next week? Working on mindful breaks and rehearsing your resilience. Thinking about some of these techniques from mindfulness meditation. So this is really important to try these out as soon as possible. Mindfulness and breathing exercises. Oh, good. Ferdy's going to work on time management. Mantras. Yes, can really help. Try these out as soon as possible, so that you can see some of these will resonate more with you with others, particularly mindfulness meditation. There are lots of different techniques you can try. Try them out now so you can see what works for you, so that then you can start practicing them, so that then if you need to use them during the test or right before the test, it will feel automatic. It will be like, this was part of my plan. This was already what I was wanting to do. So lasting positive change, did you know only a little bit of that comes from insight? About 20% of lasting positive change is coming from insight. 80% of real positive change is coming from mental muscles. So we need to practice doing this. I am hoping that you've gotten some good ideas from this, but now I really need to see you practicing it so that you build that mental muscle, so that these things become habits, automatic. This is what I do. So if I can support you in that process, you can tell I would love to. I really love people, really love helping people with this, because it's so meaningful to me to see people who've got goals that are important to them and that they can take steps to achieve them. So I work with people on GMAT coaching across the whole exam, whether it's verbal, data insights, or quant, and or we talk about the mindset part. So whether you'd like to have some coaching more specifically on that, for some people that just looks like an hour or two. For other people, they'd like to have a longer term support relationship and have that go on for longer. Through Leland, you can reach out to me, book a free intro call. It says 15 minutes. I always give you 30 minutes so we can really talk about what's on your mind. And we can think about, is this something that I could support you with moving forward? Or what's the best way to take this forward? Another thing I would ask you is that when this session finishes, Leland will send you a little pop-up and ask you, was it any good? And we'll ask you to give a rating. If this was helpful for you, I would be so grateful if you would give me a 5-star review, because it helps me. It helps other people see that this is a useful session. It helps other students see that, hey, perhaps this person could help them too. So that is super helpful for me. So I thank you in advance for that. And so now I know we're already at time, but I can stay on for the next 5 or 10 minutes. So does anybody have any questions? I appreciate, thank you for the clapping and the thank you notes in the chat too. Does anybody have any questions? Be happy to hear, like, if there's any of these things you've tried a little bit before and maybe it didn't get you the result that you wanted, or is there a situation that I might be able to give you some insight on? Thank you. Thank you. You're welcome. I very much appreciate the change in creating a greater positive mindset. Okay, Jack's got a question. How to recover from a poor test? I did well on my 6th practice test, 665, but on the actual got a 595. Wondering how to bounce back and use it as learning. Jack, that is a super typical situation, really typical situation. So the first thing I would say to you is, you are not alone. That is extremely normal. I know it is frustrating and it can be demoralizing. But I want to say to you, if you have seen a 665 on a practice test, you know that you've done a lot of the good work with the content and the skills and strategies. So now maybe we can look at that idea of what did this practice test, or sorry, what did this actual test, what did this, the experience that led to the 595, what can you learn from it? Were there things that come up? Were there any like content areas that came up that you feel like you want to get stronger at? Or do you feel like this is more an opportunity to strengthen your mindset? So to strengthen your ability to manage yourself in the moment. I would think about that. Like, what is the gift that that test has given you? Is it knowledge? Is it insight? Is it an opportunity to get better at something? um, Feel free to book an intro call with me, and I'd be happy to help you think about it more, because we can certainly take the data from that 595 and look objectively about where were your strengths and weaknesses. How does that feel compared to the strengths and weaknesses that you know you have as it relates to the exam? But then I would think about doing some more rehearsing. And I know if you've already used 6 practice tests, you are about out of official practice tests. But did you know you can reset each of those practice tests once? So of the 6 official GMAT practice tests, you can reset each of them once and get a fully new test to you. You will not see any of the same questions you have seen. It will still adapt to you appropriately. It will still score appropriately. If you reset them more than once, like if you try to take practice test 1 a total of 3 times, that 3rd time it may be a little bit compromised. But after a single reset, you still, that practice test will work well for you. So the psychometrician had told us that they're meant to do that. So you still, if you've taken each one of those practice tests once, you could reset each of them and take them again. But I would really think about trying to pinpoint, were there things that got to my focus? Were there things that bothered me in that experience that I want to use as insight now, so that I can practice responding to those and practice overcoming them? But I'd love to talk to you more about it too. So feel free to reach out through Leland, and we could book one of the intro call things to talk more about it. And this is true for anyone. If you've taken practice tests or real tests and you want to just talk through the results and talk through, what can I learn from this? How can I use this to build a study plan or tweak my study plan? That's also a great thing to talk about in an intro call. Yes, great. Look forward to hearing from you. Okay. Well, in Berlin, it is 7:05 tonight, and that means I need to go take my kids to bed here shortly. So I want to say thank you again to all of you for joining us on the call. And please do feel free to reach out to me through Leland. But otherwise, it's been a great pleasure to share this time with you. And I'm really excited for all of you, for your goals and for the work that you're looking to do with the test, with your MBA, or with your other future studies. So thank you all, and have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.